Welcome back to NEMT Van Talks. I'm Jasmine.
And I'm Monica.
And we're the owners of a non-emergency transportation company in California. Mm-hmm. Now today, we're going to talk about non-compliant drivers and vehicles, the consequences that are associated with not being compliant,
right,
and a whole lot more.
Yeah.
When it comes to compliance, there is really no compliance regulation straight across the board. So it seems like everybody's doing their own thing.
Everybody's doing their own thing.
Right?
Nobody's on the same page as regarding who regulate what. Because if you look at it, it may be different for California versus Texas versus Georgia. But there's no one department that's regulating it across the board.
And maybe that's why transportation providers are just winging it.
Yeah.
Because there's no one entity that says you have to operate this way. You have to do things by the book. But
hold on, stay right there on that topic. And you're right. That's why transportation providers are doing things that they shouldn't be doing, and because they don't really understand the compliance, who's regulating the compliance. That's why you have people that are wanting to start and not being thoroughly, trained or in compliance, because there's no regulatory really requirement saying, okay, if you did do this, then you're going to be fine. If you do this, then. But on the flip side of that, there are some consequences to not being in compliance as well, though. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about that too, though.
Not being compliant based on the contract that you have. We're definitely going to talk about that.
Yes.
But it's interesting because I was a part of a live webinar that was hosted by NEMT. In this webinar, they mentioned compliance and being compliant and setting industry standard. Really good. It was very informative, I would have to say. Because like I said, there is no real structure. And I think that's essentially the real problem.
Yes.
But anyways, let's talk about non-compliant, the consequences from being non-compliant. Number one is the risk to passengers.
Ooh, that's a big one. You know what? Because I think about that all the time when I have people call and booking a consultation and they're talking about starting this business and they're currently driving for a transportation provider and they're not compliant. Meaning when I mention things about first aid, CPR, defensive driving, they have no idea. They've never taken the course before, which for me is very concerning. Because if you have a life-threatening situation and you need to be able to provide life-saving measures, and then you don't have the basic first aid CPR, you have no idea what to do, and you have a passenger in your car that's needing your assistance, like that can be dangerous. And so that's one of the importance of making sure that all of your drivers are trained, right?
I'm into storytelling. There has been plenty of times where I have transported individuals that are in wheelchairs, and they talk about how the NEMT provider didn't properly secure them in the vehicle. There was one instance where there was a driver and an attendant, and the attendant was sitting in the back seat with the wheelchair, literally holding on to the wheelchair.
So
she didn't have any restraints attached to the wheelchair. And I said, well, why in this world would you even get in this vehicle? And she was like, you know what? I just wanted to go home. I've been in the skilled nursing facility for 3 months. I just wanted to go home, and whatever it took for me to get home, I was willing to. But what if there was some type of fatality?
I know. Yeah. And who's at risk? And then it's the thing too, like the level of service. Like, when we talk about drivers and compliance and stuff, it's like, okay, there are a lot of times where, based on your contract, you're not able to subcontract, right? Meaning you can't subcontract to you can't subcontract work out. It has to stay within your business. Your business is supposed to be doing all of the transportation services. And so a lot of times we get questions like that too, like, can you subcontract work? Well, it depends on your contract. What does your contract, stipulate? And if you do decide to subcontract work, what's the likelihood of you being reimbursed if they find out that your business is you're not doing the work?
You're not. So you're going to do all these trips and not be compensated for those trips because you used a vehicle that wasn't credentialed, or you used a driver that wasn't credentialed.
Yes.
So I mean, is it even worth it?
Yeah, and that's the key thing. Like, yeah, you can do it, but what if something happens?
Yeah.
What if something happens and now your files are being audited and it's like, okay, who was this driver? Well, we don't have that driver on record. What vehicle did they use? Well, we don't have that vehicle on record.
Right.
So it's like,
all of these things have been set in place for the safety of passengers, and simple things as vehicle inspections. Why do you think that organizations require you to thoroughly inspect your vehicles? Well, because they want to ensure the safety of the passenger.
Yeah, that's true. Now, I know when we talk about making sure that the drivers and your vehicles are credentialed, and then we just said there's nobody regulating this and monitoring these requirements. Well,
depending on if you have a contract
right.
or not.
So I want to be clear with that. So it does depend on whether you have a contract or not. And so if you're not in contract, we still encourage you to still operate your business by making sure that you are still, you still have the basics.
Common sense.
Right. You still making sure that your drivers are trained. You still making sure that your vehicle is credentialed. You have insurance. You're operating with the correct vehicles. Like, those things are common sense. And so, yes.
Speaking to that, we have a vehicle inspection checklist on our website. Yeah. So if you're not sure, definitely check out that vehicle checklist. Yeah.
So we point all of that out because as a business owner, whether you're working with a facility, a broker, you have a contract or not, you want to just make sure that you are adhering to all of the the guidelines, so that you won't fall in this category where you're not being compliant.
Yeah. And another thing too is your overall reputation.
Yes.
You think about if something happens, right? Like, I mean, I've shared with you guys several times of incidences that have occurred within the NEMT industry, from fatalities to drivers drinking before their shift. All of these things can affect your reputation. For instance, that one particular situation back on the East Coast, where there was a fatality.
Yes.
The information, it was all over the news.
Yes. I think you did a little bit. The guy dropped his phone or something. He was trying to pick it up and had a head-on collision.
Yeah.
Yes.
Same thing with the guy who was drinking. He had the open container in the vehicle, and there was a fatality. That company was all over the news. What about the company in the San Fernando Valley where the driver left the keys in the vehicle and the homeless lady hopped in the vehicle and
took off on a joyride
with the client in the back of the vehicle?
Yes.
That company was on the news.
Yes.
So you definitely want to make sure that you are training your staff, preparing them for the worst possible situations that could possibly happen, so that you can protect your reputation.
Oh, that was great. I forgot all about those stories. Like, there have been so much that happened in this industry, and I was like, I didn't realize until you just reminded me. So those are really good examples.
And also, preparing for audits, preparing for inspections. Make sure you keep detailed records of when you're changing out the tires, when you're changing, when you're doing maintenance on your vehicles, when your drivers are having trainings. Make sure that you notate that and keep that documentation.
Hold on, because I taught you guys well about your what? Employee file. Yes, so you want to make sure that you have all of those documents in that employee file, so whenever you need to go back to reference anything, whether it's training, you have all your documentation together. So if there is an incident where one of your employees is involved in a car accident, And you want to be able to reference your file to make sure you've trained them and they're trained up. So absolutely.
Yeah. And keep a spreadsheet of when your next maintenance is due on your vehicles, when your driver trainings expire, so that you can stay on top of it. Just stay away from non-compliance. When you think of non-compliance, stay away from it.